It begins on a quiet afternoon in a small town in Oregon where Emma Miller has been living alone for 3 months after the sudden death of her husband, Daniel. The house still carries his scent, his laughter, and the routines he left behind. Emma tries her best to stay busy. But grief has a way of slipping through even the strongest walls, and every day feels like a slow, heavy climb. She keeps the curtains half closed, not because she wants darkness, but because bright sunlight reminds her of the life she once had. She's learning to breathe again, but it's slow work. On this particular day, she hears a soft knock at the front door. She ignores it at first, thinking it's a delivery or a neighbor checking on her again. But the knock comes again, gentle, hesitant, the kind of knock that already carries a story. When she finally walks to the door and opens it, she finds her stepson Luke standing there. He looks older than she remembers, as if grief has carved new lines into his face. He's 24, tall and usually confident, but today his shoulders look weighed down. He isn't wearing his usual easy smile. Instead, he looks like a man trying very hard not to break. Emma is surprised to see him. They've talked a few times since Daniel's funeral, but he stays mostly in Seattle, working long hours and avoiding anything that reminds him of his father. Seeing him on her doorstep feels unexpected, almost unreal, Luke, she says softly. He tries to answer, but his voice cracks. He clears his throat, taking a breath the way someone does when they're searching for courage. Emma, can we talk? There's something in his eyes, fear, exhaustion, loss that makes her step back and open the door wider without another question. He enters slowly, as if unsure he belongs in a house filled with memories of the man they both loved. Emma leads him to the living room, the same room where Daniel used to read the newspaper in the mornings. Luke looks around and she sees his jaw tighten like he's fighting back a flood of emotions. They both sit, but not close. There's a respectful distance between them, the kind that comes from not wanting to burden the other person with too much pain. Luke rubs his hands together before finally speaking. I don't know how else to say this, he begins, eyes fixed on the floor. I tried to stay strong. I tried to handle everything. But after Dad, he stops, swallowing hard. After Dad died, everything in my life started falling apart. Work, sleep, everything. Emma listens quietly. She knows grief behaves differently for everyone. Some people cry. Some go silent. Some run from the pain. Luke seems like he's been trying to outrun it, and it finally caught him. He takes a shaky breath. I thought I could get through this alone. But I can't. I don't want to be in my apartment anymore. It feels empty. I feel empty. Then he lifts his eyes to hers. Can I move back home? Just until I can stand up again. I just don't. Want to be alone? The question hits Emma like a wave. For a moment, she can't speak. She remembers how Daniel used to talk about Luke, how proud he was of him, how much he wanted them to support each other. She remembers all the mornings when Luke would sit on this very couch as a teenager, drinking hot chocolate and complaining about school. She remembers the family dinners, the quiet car rides, the awkward but warm beginnings of their blended family. And then she remembers the day they lost Daniel, the single day that changed everything. Now, looking at Luke, she sees not a grown man, but someone who has been hurting alone for far too long. She sees the same kind of grief she feels deep inside her own chest. And she knows, without hesitation, that she cannot shut him out. Yes, she says softly. Of course, Luke, you can stay here. You don't have to struggle alone. He lets out a breath he's been holding for months. His shoulders drop, the tension in his face fades just a little, and he nods with relief. Thank you, he whispers. I didn't know who else to ask. Emma tries to smile, but emotion stings her eyes. She walks to the window and pulls the curtains open a little, letting light spill into the room. It feels like a small act of courage, a small step toward letting life back in. Luke stands up and walks to the doorway of the hallway, staring into the house like he's seeing it for the first time. It feels so strange being back, he says. Like Dad could walk in any second. Emma nods, her voice low. I know. I still expect him to call my name from the kitchen. The air between them softens, filled with shared memory instead of silence. For the first time in months, the house feels less hollow. Luke goes back to the door to bring in a single suitcase he left on the porch. And as he steps across the threshold with it, a small but powerful shift happens. It's not dramatic or sudden, but it's real. Two people who were grieving apart are now stepping into a space where healing might finally begin. They don't say anything else for several moments. They just stand there, both aware that this moment marks the start of a new chapter neither of them planned, but both quietly needed. The weight of what lies ahead still hangs in the air. They don't know how living together again will feel. They don't know if the memories will comfort them or break them. They don't know if healing together will be easier or harder than healing alone. But they both know one thing for certain. They can't keep living in the dark as Luke closes the door behind him. Emma senses the beginning of something difficult. Emotional and meaningful, not romantic. Not inappropriate, but deeply human. A story about rebuilding, about rediscovering family after loss, and finding comfort in the only person who understands the shape of their grief. Luke settled into the house quietly, almost carefully, as if he didn't want to disturb the memories that lived in every corner. He unpacked only the basics: clothes, a framed picture of his father, a few books, leaving the rest of his suitcase untouched. Emma watched him from a distance, feeling a mix of relief, worry, and unexpected comfort. Having someone else in the house made it feel less like a museum of her former life and more like a home again. The first few days were awkward. They were used to seeing each other only on holidays and family dinners, not sharing the same roof. Mornings were the quietest. Emma would sit by the window with her tea, and Luke would walk into the kitchen with tired eyes, offering a small smile before reaching for the coffee maker. They spoke softly, careful with their words, as if both feared stepping on fragile emotions neither of them had fully unpacked. But as the days passed, the silence began to feel less heavy and more like understanding. One evening, after Emma returned from grocery shopping, she found Luke standing in the hallway, staring at the family photo hanging above the console table. It was taken 4 years earlier. Daniel, with his arm around Emma, Luke standing beside them with a shy smile. It had been one of their first photos as a blended family. Luke didn't look away when Emma approached. He just said, "I used to think Dad would live forever. I knew he wouldn't, but just never thought about it." Emma placed the grocery bag down and stood beside him. "I never thought about it either," she admitted. "Some people fill a room so much that you forget they're human too." The honesty in her voice made Luke take a small breath, like he'd been holding something inside for too long. That night, Emma cooked a simple dinner: pasta with vegetables, the way Daniel liked it. She wasn't even thinking about it when she made it. Her hands moved out of habit. When she placed the bowl on the table, she softly whispered, "He used to ask for this almost every Sunday." Luke looked at the food, then at her. "He made it for me every time I visited." His smile was small but real, except he always added too much cheese. Emma laughed, a real warm laugh that surprised her. Spry? He never learned how to measure anything. That laugh changed something. It broke the stiffness between them. It reminded them both that grief didn't erase the good memories. It only made them harder to touch at first. After dinner, they sat in the living room. Luke noticed a box in the corner that Emma hadn't opened yet. "What's that?" he asked, gently. Emma looked at it for a moment. Some of Daniel's things. Letters, photos, stuff from when he was younger. Her voice trembled. "I haven't been able to go through it." Luke nodded slowly, almost as if he understood before she explained further. "It feels like opening it would make everything real," he said. "Like admitting he's not coming back?" Emma didn't say anything, but the tears in her eyes said enough. The next morning, Luke offered to help her organize the garage, which had become a quiet storage of untouched boxes. Emma hesitated. She wasn't ready to face everything, but Luke insisted he would handle the heavy lifting while they worked. He asked her questions about his father that he never asked before. Did he always listen to jazz? Or did he just start recently? Emma answered honestly. He listened when he was stressed. Jazz made him feel steady. Luke smiled. I didn't know that. They kept talking, not in deep conversations, but in small pieces, stories, memories, moments. It was surprising how much they didn't know about each other's connection to the same man. The house, once quiet and sad, now echoed with soft stories that warmed the air. But grief has strange timing. Some days were better. Some days were unpredictable. One snowy evening, Luke walked into the living room and found Emma staring at an unopened envelope with Daniel's handwriting on the front. She held it as if it were fragile glass. I found this while you were outside, she said. I don't know if I can read it. Luke sat down carefully. You don't have to. Not until you're ready. Emma looked at him, her eyes tired but grateful. Thank you, she whispered. For a few quiet moments they sat close, not touching, but together in a way that felt supportive, not heavy. They didn't share the same grief, but they understood each other's loss, and that created a kind of emotional bond neither expected. Later that night, Luke stood outside his father's old study, his hand resting on the door. Emma passed by and noticed. I haven't gone in since the funeral, he said without turning around. I keep telling myself I'll do it tomorrow. Emma didn't push. Whenever you're ready, she said softly. Luke nodded, grateful. She didn't ask him to be stronger than he felt. As days passed, their routines began to merge. They cooked together sometimes, shared updates about their days, watched simple shows in the evenings. It wasn't dramatic. It was healing, slow and gentle. But the closeness brought unexpected emotions too. Not romantic ones, just a kind of deep attachment that forms when two people are the only ones left who fully understand a loss. Luke began leaning on Emma for emotional steadiness, while Emma leaned on Luke for company and support. One night, after a long day of sorting through unopened boxes, Luke finally said something he'd been holding inside. Emma, I don't know who I am without Dad. I feel like everything I built was because he believed in me. And now, he paused, his voice cracking. Now I don't know what direction to take. Emma felt her heart tighten. She wanted to help him, but she knew she couldn't solve what grief had taken from him. Still, she couldn't walk away from him either. You don't have to figure everything out now, she said gently. You're hurting. You're allowed to fall apart for a while. Luke looked at her with exhausted eyes. Can you stay with me for a bit? Just talk. I don't want to sit alone tonight. Emma hesitated, not because she wanted to refuse, but because she worried about becoming the only support he had left. But then she remembered Daniel's voice, always telling her to take care of Luke, always trusting her with him, so she nodded. They sat together in the warm, soft glow of the living room lamp. No dramatic words, no heavy confessions, just two people healing the same wound from different sides. As winter settled deeper over the small town, Emma and Luke fell into a quiet rhythm that felt strangely natural. Not easy, not comfortable, but familiar, like to people learning how to move through grief without falling apart. The days were colder, the evenings darker, but the house no longer felt silent. Soft footsteps, small conversations, and the shared weight of memory filled the rooms like a gentle heartbeat. Luke had started working from home temporarily, trying to rebuild the stability he'd lost in Seattle. Every morning, he sat at the dining table with his laptop, headphones on, brow furrowed in concentration. Emma would pass by, refill his coffee, or offer a small smile that made his tense shoulders relax. She didn't hover, but she didn't leave him alone either. She had learned that sometimes healing wasn't about saying the right words. It was about not letting someone sit in their pain by themselves. One evening, snow fell hard, coating everything in white. The two of them decided to stay in and make soup. While chopping vegetables, Luke asked a question that caught Emma off guard. Did Dad ever tell you what his biggest regret was? Emma paused, knife in hand. Why do you ask? Luke shrugged. I keep thinking about all the things I didn't say to him. All the time I wasted being busy. His voice dropped. Sometimes I feel like I failed him. Emma shook her head immediately. Your father loved you every single day. You didn't fail him. You were his biggest pride. Luke didn't answer right away, but something in his expression softened like a heavy door inside him had cracked open. After dinner, they sat in the living room. The fireplace glowed orange and warm. Without planning it, they started sharing stories. Good ones, painful ones, funny ones. Emma told him about the early days of her marriage to Daniel, how nervous she was meeting Luke for the first time. How she practiced what to say because she wanted to be someone Luke could trust. Luke laughed at that, surprised. I had no idea you were nervous, he said. I was the one worried you wouldn't want me around. Their bond deepened in those simple exchanges. But the more they shared, the more emotional cracks appeared. Healing is never clean. It pulls old memories forward, forces new questions, and exposes wounds people didn't know they still had. One night, after a long day of going through old boxes in the garage, Luke found a small leather-bound journal that belonged to his father. He didn't open it. He just held it, staring at the cover. When he walked into the living room, Emma recognized the journal immediately. That was his, she said softly. He kept notes about his work, his plans, sometimes his fears. Luke sat down, still turning the journal in his hands. Do you think he wrote about me? His voice was unsteady. I know he did, Emma replied. He stared at the fire before asking, would it be wrong to read it? Emma took a slow breath. No, it was his life, and you were part of it. If it helps you understand him better, then it's okay. Luke didn't open it that night, but he kept it close, as if holding the journal brought him closer to the father he missed so deeply. Later that week, a storm knocked out the power for several hours. The house went dark except for a few candles Emma lit. The wind howled outside, shaking the windows but inside the house. The atmosphere felt strangely calm. Luke sat across from Emma, shadows flickering across his face, and said something unexpected. I used to think Dad was impossible to talk to, he admitted. But now that he's gone, I'd give anything for one more conversation, even if it was just him telling me to fix my life. Emma nodded, her heart aching. Grief makes us want things we can't have anymore. Luke leaned back, eyes tired. I hate that I didn't spend enough time with him. I hate that I didn't visit more. I hate that I left things unsaid. He paused, as if afraid of sounding weak. And I hate that I can't fix it now. Emma reached forward not to touch him, but to steady her own emotions. Your father knew you loved him. Even when you were busy, even when you didn't visit, he never doubted that. Luke looked up, meeting her eyes for a long, quiet moment. I hope you're right. That night, something changed. Not in a dramatic or inappropriate way, just emotionally. They weren't stepmother and stepson navigating grief separately anymore. They were two people trying to rebuild their lives in the shadow of someone they both loved deeply. They leaned on each other, not out of dependency, but because the loneliness was too heavy to carry alone. Another day, Luke found Emma in the study, sorting through Daniel's old documents. She had opened one drawer she'd been avoiding for months. Drawer filled with letters and notes Daniel wrote before he passed away. Her hands trembled as she tried to organize the papers. Luke stepped closer, noticing her distress. You're okay? He asked gently. Emma shook her head. Some days I still feel like he'll walk through that door. She pointed toward the hallway. I'm afraid if I put everything away, I'll lose him. Luke understood. He walked to her side, not touching, just standing with her. You won't lose him, he said quietly. Not as long as we remember him. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She leaned slightly against the desk to steady herself. Luke stayed with her until she regained her breath. The moment was emotional, but respectful, two grieving hearts holding each other up without crossing lines. Eventually, they started sorting postcards, old receipts, and photos. Luke found one picture of Daniel laughing so hard his eyes were almost closed. Emma took it, smiled sadly, and said, he loved life more than anyone I've ever known. Luke nodded, staring at the photo as if memorizing every detail later that evening. They sat near the fireplace again, both exhausted. Luke looked at the flames and said something that marked the emotional peak of the chapter. "Emma, I think Dad would be proud of us. For trying. For not giving up." Emma inhaled sharply, her heart tightening. She had wondered the same thing so many times. "I hope so," she whispered. Luke reached out not to hold her hand, but to place his hand gently on the table between them, offering support without crossing personal boundaries. Emma placed her hand near his, not touching, but close enough to show she felt the same connection. It was not romance. It was not inappropriate. It was grief. It was healing. It was two people standing in the same storm, trying to find steady ground. Spring arrived quietly, almost shyly, as if it didn't want to disrupt the fragile healing that had begun inside Emma and Luke's home. The snow melted, the trees filled with soft green, and sunlight slipped through the windows more confidently each morning. The world outside was moving forward, and slowly so were they. Luke had finally regained some balance. He found a new job at a local tech company, steadier and closer to home than the one he left in Seattle. His days became structured again: morning, coffee, work calls, occasional gym visits, and evenings spent peacefully with Emma. He wasn't healed, not fully, but he wasn't drowning anymore. Emma also began stepping back into life. She joined a grief support center as a volunteer, something she had wanted to do for months but couldn't bring herself to face. Helping others taught her something important. Everyone carries a story. Everyone loses someone. Everyone survives in small moments, not big ones. And sometimes healing happens in ways you don't see until later. Life didn't magically get better, but it became livable again. One morning, while organizing documents for property taxes, Emma came across a folder she hadn't noticed before. It was tucked between old medical receipts and insurance forms. The label was simple for Emma. Her breath caught. She didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she placed it carefully on the dining table and walked to the kitchen for a glass of water, trying to steady her hands. A few minutes later, Luke walked in wearing a light jacket, preparing to leave for work. He noticed the envelope and frowned gently. "What's that?" Emma stared at it, unsure whether to smile or cry. "It's from your father." Luke stepped closer, his voice soft. "Do you want to open it alone?" Emma shook her head. "I don't know if I can open it at all." Luke pulled out a chair and sat beside her. Not too close, not touching, but near enough to offer silent support. "I can stay," he said, "if you want." Emma looked at him, this young man who had been hurting, who had leaned on her, who now offered her strength when she needed it most. She nodded. She opened the envelope with slow, careful hands. Inside was a letter written in Daniel's familiar handwriting, steady, neat, the handwriting of a man who always thought before he spoke. Emma unfolded the letter. Her hand shook, but she began to read. "My Emma," it began. "If you are reading this, it means life took a turn I could not prepare you for. And for that, I am sorry." Her breath broke at the first line. Luke stayed silent, watching her with quiet, steady concern. She continued reading. "There are two people in this world I trust more than anyone, you and my son. I need you both to take care of each other. Not out of duty, not out of guilt, out of love. Because you understand each other in ways I never could." Emma blinked back tears. Luke swallowed hard. "Do not let grief push you into separate corners of the world. Stay connected. Stay honest. Stay gentle with each other. You both deserve peace, and I hope you find it together in your own ways." Emma's tears finally fell. She pressed her palm to her mouth, trying to contain a sob that slipped through anyway. Luke reached forward, not grabbing her hand, but placing his hand lightly near hers on the table, offering a silent bridge she could step onto if she wanted. She did. She placed her trembling hand over his, and Luke held it gently, respectfully. Grounding her the same way she had held him together weeks earlier, Emma lowered her head over the letter. He always thought ahead. Always. Luke nodded. He wanted you to be okay. His voice faltered. He wanted us both to be okay. Emma wiped her eyes, trying to steady her breath. He trusted you, Luke. He trusted me. I don't want to let him down. Luke looked at her with soft determination. We won't. The room felt full of love, memory, grief, and something warm that wasn't sadness anymore. Something closer to acceptance later that week. They decided to take a step neither had taken since the funeral. They cleaned Daniel's old study. Not to erase him, but to create space for new life. The moment felt heavy but right. The room smelled like old books and dust and something Emma couldn't name. Luke pulled out boxes. Emma sorted papers, and together they made slow but meaningful progress. Every drawer they opened revealed another memory concert tickets Daniel had saved. A broken watch he meant to fix. Old photos from Luke's childhood. They laughed at some, cried at others. At one point, Luke sat on the floor, holding a photo of him and Daniel fishing by the lake. His voice was quiet. He taught me how to be brave. I didn't even realize it until now. Emma sat beside him. He taught me the same thing. There was no romantic tension, no blurred lines, just two people finding strength in shared remembrance. When they finally finished, the study looked different. Warmer, lighter, less like a shrine and more like a space where life could begin again. A few days later, Luke approached Emma with another request different from the one months earlier. Emma, he began carefully, can I ask you something? She looked up from the sink. Of course. He handed her a small folder with papers. Dad listed you and me as joint decision makers for the house. But I don't want you carrying everything alone. So if you'll let me, I want to help more. With bills, with repairs, with anything we need to keep this home steady. Emma stared at him, surprised and touched. Luke, you don't have to do that, I know, he said. But I want to. This is home for both of us. She felt warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. Not romantic warmth, not emotional dependence, just the comfort of knowing she wasn't facing life alone anymore. Thank you, Luke, she whispered. I needed that more than I realized. The final shift came on a calm spring evening. Emma placed Daniel's letter back into the box of keepsakes. Not hidden, not buried, just safely kept, like a guide for the future. Luke stood beside her, watching with a soft, steady expression. They didn't speak, because nothing needed to be said. The moment wasn't about endings. It was about beginnings. Not dramatic ones, quiet ones, human ones, healing ones. They weren't replacing Daniel. They weren't trying to fill the same space he once held. They were honoring him by learning how to live again, and for the first time since the day he died. The house felt warm in a way that wasn't built on memory alone. It felt like life. It felt like hope. It felt like family.